Today we're talking about section 10.3, which is solving quadratic equations. So we've talked about different ways of graphing, and we're going to continue graphing, but what happens when our quadratics get more complicated and they get larger and, there's different things going on. So there are different ways of graphing. We can use our axis of symmetry equation, which is x equals negative b over 2a. But there are also other ways of graphing, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, and there's other ways of solving. So we're going to kind of talk about solving quadratic equations as well as graphing them. So first let's start off with some vocab, and then we'll get into solving and graphing here in a little bit. So first and foremost, a blank is an equation that can be written in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. I want to point that out right here first and foremost. So previously when we have talked about quadratic functions, it was ax squared plus bx plus c equals y, or equals f of x. It equals 0 instead, meaning it's an equation versus before it's a function, okay? So that's going to be the big difference. This is called a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation is written in this form. This is also, so this right here is also our standard form. Okay, so then the solutions of a quadratic equation and the related x-intercepts are called, so we have two terms, they're called zeros, or they're called roots, okay? Solutions, so when we solve a quadratic equation, they're called zeros or roots. In other words, our x-intercepts are zeros and roots. So all four of these words mean the same thing. Zeros, roots, solutions, x-intercepts, they're all the same thing, okay? So our x-intercepts are, or our solutions when we solve a quadratic, are the x-intercepts. And our x-intercepts we call zeros and roots, okay? So now let's get into solving and graphing. I know I want to solve the equation because it, first and foremost, it says solve in the directions. So it says solve each equation by graphing the related functions. So another way I can tell is that it says equals 0, okay? So in the previous sections, it would have said equals y, or equals f of x, and we know that's when we have to use the axis of symmetry method, okay? So we're going to use our basic problem-solving skills to solve. We want to get x by itself. That's the main goal, okay? So in order to get x by itself, I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and I get x squared equals 4, okay? X is not alone. What this is saying is x squared equals 4, so x is not by itself, okay? Just in the same sense that 2x, that means that x is not by itself. 2x and x squared are not the same, but kind of the similar idea in terms of solving and getting x by itself. So how do we undo something that is squared? To undo something that is squared, we're actually going to take the square root, okay? And taking the square root is finding two numbers that when multiplied together, so x times x, is going to give you 4. So our answer here is going to be x equals, well, the square root of 4 is 2, because 2 times 2 gives you 4. But something to keep in mind, what also gives you positive 4 when you multiply it by itself? Not necessarily just positive 2, but negative 2, okay? Because negative 2 times negative 2 gives you positive 4. So it's going to be x equals plus and minus 2, or positive and negative 2. Okay, so you can write it out as plus minus 2, or you can write it out as 2 comma negative 2. They mean the same thing. So now we're going to go ahead and graph. X equals positive 2 and negative 2. So that means on our x-axis, we're going to go to positive 2, put a point, It's our x-intercept, right? Remember, our solutions, when we get x equals something, our solutions are the x-intercepts. So I have x equals positive 2 and x equals negative 2. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those two x-intercepts. Okay? Now we want to find the vertex. I know that these are my x-intercepts, so it's either going to open up or it's going to open down. But I don't know exactly where that vertex is going to be, and I want to find it. So using our axis of symmetry and knowing that our axis of symmetry is right in the middle of our parabola, or right in the middle of our graph, my x-intercepts, we want to find the center of them, right? So my x-intercepts are going to be reflective on both sides, meaning they're going to be the same distance from my axis of symmetry. So if they are 4 blocks apart, that means if I go 2 blocks in on both sides, for this right here is going to be my axis of symmetry. Okay, so again, because they're symmetric, my axis of symmetry is going to be the same distance from both parts. It has to split it down the middle. Okay, so my axis of symmetry is going to be down the middle between my two x-intercepts. So that means x is going to be 0 for my axis of symmetry, right? But in order to find my vertex, I just have to plug in 0 for x and then plug in 0 for x, and we would in turn solve for a y, but we're going to figure out what y would be. So if I plug in 0 for x, we're going to get 0 squared, which is 0 minus 4, equals, in our terms, we're going to rewrite this as y. So x squared minus 4 equals y. Plug in 0, and you get negative 4 equals y. So then I'm going to graph 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be my vertex. In this case, I only need those 3 points. I'm going to go ahead and graph. Okay, so now we're going to repeat the same process. Again, we start off a little bit differently. We're going to solve. So we want to get x by itself. We subtract 4 first on both sides. And guys, if you need your lines, draw your lines. Okay, x by itself divided by 2. X squared equals negative 2. What times what will give you negative 2? Is it possible? So if we would go ahead and take the square root here, what times what will give you negative 2? It's not possible. There's no such number that when you multiply together, you're going to get a negative, okay? So here's something that is really, really big in our, in this section, right? You can never take the square root of a negative. It won't ever happen because a negative times a negative will be a positive, and a positive times a positive will be a positive. You will never get something times something to equal a negative, so it's not possible to get something that will equal negative 2, okay? In this case, our answer is no solution. But what does that mean, right? Our solutions are the x-intercepts. So if I have no solution, that means I have no x-intercepts. Is there still a graph? Yeah. There's just no x-intercepts, okay? So when this happens, we just need to make a table of values similar to how we started off in the first section with. We need to pick points that are negative, some in the middle, and some that are positive. So let's go negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. Let's figure out what's happening with this graph. Okay? Just means it's not going to cross this line. So it's either going to stay below that line or go way above that line. So here we go. Plug in negative 2 for x. You're going to get negative 2 squared, which is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 4 is 12. Plug in negative 1, you get negative 1 squared, which is 1 times 2 is 2, plus 4 is 6. Plug in 0, you're going to get 4. Plug in 1, you're going to get 6. Plug in 2, and you're going to get 12. Okay, if you want to pause the video and go back and double check your work with mine, please do so. Otherwise, I'm going to start graphing. So negative 2, 12, negative 2, 12, negative 1, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 0, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 6, 2, 12. Okay, and then since I have my table of values, my 5 points, I'm just going to go ahead and draw my graph. Okay, so that's solving and graphing. So now let's talk more solving. We want to get x by itself. Guys, again, if it helps, draw your line. Okay, I'm a line person. I like drawing my lines. So plus 98 on both sides, plus 98. I'm going to get 2x squared equals 98. I want to get x by itself, so divide by 2. X squared equals 98 divided by 2 is 49. Square root of both sides. X equals positive negative 7. And I'm done. Okay, that's all you have to do. So let's continue on with the next one. If you feel like you got the hang of it, I want you to pause the video, try this one on your own, okay? And then come back and walk through it with me and double check your work with mine, okay? So minus 32, again, I want to get g by itself, so minus 32. 2g squared equals negative 32. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. G squared equals negative 16. I need to take the square root. And I get, I can't do that. I can't take the square root of a negative, so my answer is going to be no solution. Which means, remember, no solution means what? Means no x-intercepts. Okay, just as a reminder for you. So your answer when you solve is no solution.